Welcome back, everyone. I'm David Hamilton, founder and chairman of the America's Future Series. We've had a great day so far. We're going to finish strong here. We're getting close to the end. I'm really honored to have the Honorable Secretary Patrick Murphy with us. I've known him for a long time. He's been an advisor of the America's Future Series for many years. Some done great service to our military, helped our Army modernize. Glad that you're here, and I'm glad you're leading this conversation with a couple of really brilliant minds. I'm going to turn it over to you, Secretary. Really appreciate it. I want to thank you, Mr. Bang, and you, Mr. Serebryany, for joining us. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm a big fan of the American Future Series and the great work that you all do. And thank you for joining us back at home. I'm gonna let each of us introduce themselves, but let me I have to take a point of personal privilege here. Young Bang has been a friend of mine for a long time. He's doing a phenomenal job in the Pentagon with acquisitions with Doug Bush, and just a phenomenal leader. And not just because he's a West Point graduate in 1993 and served at Bragg where I did, and over Korea and Meade and elsewhere, but his first job out of the military, out of the Army, was working for MCI, which was founded by Bill McGowan, who's no longer with us. But Bill McGowan started MCI, was a King's College graduate where I earned my degree. And I'm a graduate of the Bill McGowan School of Business at King's College, a small little Catholic college in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, where I played hockey. So, if you wouldn't mind, just introduce yourself, let folks know your role and why you're excited to be here at South by Southwest.
Yeah, so Patrick, thank you. I appreciate it, sir.
No.
But super happy to be here, and thank you for the invite. Love being back in Austin. I used to come to Austin all the time, actually. Keep Austin weird and love that. But really, if you think about South by, not only is it the mecca of film and industry, it's also the mecca of tech. And for me, tech is a passion. You just talked about MCI UNet days and product development all my life around hardware and software. And so for me, it was pretty easy when a friend of mine, my classmate, Doug Bush, who's the AAE, asked to come in and help with the Army's transformation, right? And so for me, that was a passion. I remember all the times being at Bragg and saying, who's the idiot at the Pentagon that really thought this is going to work? And so now I have an opportunity to really help.
The record that time.
But now I'm really super excited to really help with the Army modernization, but really drive it from a digital transformation standpoint. And I just really appreciate that. To answer your question from my perspective, our role, I'm the PDEP for ASALT. And people are like, what is the ASALT? So it's really acquisitions, logistics, and technology. We're really driving the T portion of that this year. Technology, we're going to drive that in 2023. And we're going to drive that to really modernize all of our systems, weapon systems, business systems, data systems, software systems. So again, thank you for the honor of being on this panel with you.
Oh, thanks, John. All right, Neil, you and I had a good chance to get to know each other today. I love your background. I love the fact that you are truly a founder's founder. You get under the hood and get after it. And we'd like to say that, you can't believe that you took college classes at age 13, but give us your background if you don't mind.
Yeah, Patrick, thanks so much for the opportunity to chat, and thank you to America's Future Series. I'm really excited about this conversation. I run a company called Calypso AI, and we're basically dedicated to making the best software imaginable for securing your machine learning models. And really excited to talk about, the end-to-end process of actually, creating a machine learning model, the end-to-end process of securing a machine learning model, and what this really means for us in the context of the emerging fight and the emerging threat that is only going to become more and more pervasive over the coming years.
You and I talked about this. It's personal for you because we are in a current fight. Obviously, the illegal invasion of the Ukraine by Russia, but it's personal to you. And can you tell us why it's so personal?
Yeah, my parents are actually refugees from Ukraine. They were born, they grew up in Odessa, Ukraine. And I actually had a number of members of my family that were in Soviet gulags. And they were in Soviet gulags for the crime of profiteering. Now, what we call profiteering in the US is capitalism, basically buying and selling at different prices. And really excited, to see the impact that some of our work is having on the fight, and B, to do anything I can personally or through the company to help the Ukrainians beat the Russian invaders.
Young, let me turn to you. and if we could focus a little bit on the fight in Ukraine. I know the near peer competitor is obviously, and our pacing threat is China, but let's talk about the Ukraine. How much have you, as a team in the building, have to put forth in that effort to make sure we push back and stand strong with our allies?
Yeah, I mean, this is fundamental. And just like your story, being an immigrant, a lot of us take freedom for granted. So when anything like this happens, we got to stand tight with our partners. We got to help and defend freedom. And so for everyone, yes, it is a war in Ukraine. It's the Ukrainians that are fighting the Russians, but no bones about it. The biggest partner helping with that fight is the US. And ASALT, I know, sir, but ASALT, we also have something called the Foreign Military Sales Process. And it is a land fight right now. And so most of the support that's going out there, anything from camo nets to some of our exquisite weapon systems, are there to help our partners. And people think about all our exquisite systems, but we all know war is a personal thing, right? And people are really the center of it. And the Ukrainians are intelligently super, super bright. They're doing amazing things with technology, but then also the training that the Army has done with the Ukrainians, right, for the past 10 years has really been a big differentiator in my mind. And us working with the Ukrainians here has really accelerated. And some of the technologies that the Ukrainian ingenuity that they've come up with, as well as with our US support in Germany and Poland, some of those other areas, I think is making a huge difference. But we really need to continue the fight. We need all of the other partners and allies in NATO to really support that. And we do have to defend freedom.
I think Russia and other even allies of ours were surprised at the Ukrainian will of their people. What they didn't recognize is that we've been standing shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine through our state partnership program. Most folks don't realize that we have 1 million soldiers in our army. The majority of our soldiers are actually in the reserve component, either the National Guard or the Army Reserve. And we have these state partnership programs where we have National Guard going to train foreign countries, kind of a special forces-esque type of program. And we've been in Ukraine, as you mentioned, for over a decade, so that when Russia did invade, they were ready to stand toe to toe and make sure, as Young said, it's not a fair fight, that our troops, that our allies have the technical and tactical advantage over our enemy. Let me turn it over back to you, Neil, if you don't mind. You are one of the world's experts on AI. You and I have talked how people can confuse AI versus machine learning, and it kind of drives us both crazy. But what do you think we could be doing better as a country when we talk about the whole of nation, not just the whole government approach, but the whole of nation approach here in the United States?
Yeah, I really think it's a combination of things. One, from a kind of defense perspective, I really think differentiating innovation from invention is clear. A lot of what we have to do is, fundamental advances in the scientific literature. It's that, TRL 1 through TRL 4 work, but a lot more of it is actually around how do you innovate to specific problem sets that really, really matter from a defense perspective, and how do we really understand the differences between kind of exquisite sensors and between further advances on the machine learning side of the house, where our ability to be able to better provide insights at both the strategic level and the tactical level is going to be the primary differentiator in our capability and our ability to win in the future. And from a whole of nation perspective, I think it really gets back to this values-based conversation, where fundamentally, I think that the more people that understand that we're in a fight for the basic values of freedom, of liberty, and are willing to actually do their part, the better we are. Because when we look at our near peer adversaries and we're looking at how they're kind of marshaling their citizenry, both by force and by persuasion, it's really, really worrying, and we can't lose sight of our essential values as part of that.
I'm passionate about the recruiting piece. I don't want to digress though too much, and maybe I'll get back to that. But let me ask you, what do you think about as Neil says that? How are we doing as far as the Army, and how do you feel like we could, moving forward, do even better?
Yeah, I mean,
With the whole nation approach, I'm sorry.
the whole nation approach, I think, is really good, because if you think about it, we're at a talent war. The commercial sector's in a talent war period with the need of digitally literate people, digitally literate leaders, digitally literate employees, coders, developers, everything. The Army and the DoD in the same talent war, right? And as we evolve our modernization programs and our Army systems, all of that's foundationally underpinned by digital technology and transformation. And the biggest thing that we need, the whole nation approach is we need better educated, literate leaders in the DoD and actually in government in general, right? People like Neil, amazing, brilliant minds, but amazing, brilliant minds don't walk around on the streets. And across industry, across leadership, around government, and as well as DoD, we need more leaders that understand the technology. But more importantly, to that effect, it's not just the technology that's going to drive change and impact everything that we do in the future. We need people that understand the technology to employ that for us in the Army, into the missions, but more importantly, not be bounded by, okay, we're going to automate this. We're going to automate this computer vision and algorithm so you don't have to watch this video anymore, right? Great. Those are incremental things. If we want to really change the way that we are transforming and modernization of the Army and the DoD, we need people that understand the tech to think about how should we employ this? What are the concepts? What are the TTPs, especially in a wartime conflict? And what are the ethics? Again, we have a different approach than our peer threats who don't care about privacy, don't care about ethics, don't care about those things. We do. And it's imperative that we have more leaders that understand the tech, but more importantly, how to apply the tech in an ethical way so we can actually defeat our peer threats and their pacing threats.
To me, you all know I teach part-time at the Wharton Business School, and I have a venture capital company called Stony Lonesome Group, and I have great, colleagues of yours from West Point that help run it. But to me, having a venture capital company, it's a mindset. You're not looking for singles and doubles. You're looking for a grand slam. And so I spent time with folks like John Doerr, and what we talk about, we know it now as venture capital, but it used to be experiential capital. And it has changed the game. But I know, Neil, you are also an investor beside the company that you run. What are you looking at when I look at, my venture capital company? We invested in 60 companies. We focus on dual use companies where there's a government application and see a private sector application. We're very proud of companies like ID.me that does great stuff for the private sector and for the government. It's worth now about $1.6 billion. It's run by West Point graduate Blake Hall. But Neil, what do you see from your perch? Because you spent some time, obviously, still in Silicon Valley, and what more could we be doing in the private sector to marry, team up with the government?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So one, I really like how you kind of spoke about the idea of paradigm shifts and how you don't want those single or doubles, but you want those types of companies that will really shift the paradigm and the nature of what we're talking about. I think today, when we look at kind of a lot of the news that we've been hearing about ChatGPT, that we've been hearing about large language models, and I think you want to say something here. I think there's this really big question now that we've, as a public, kind of seen some of the power of AI, but we've also seen some of the many negative impacts from the perspective of models hallucinating, from the perspective of security, from privacy, to kind of have that discourse, that conversation, and make sure that we're propelling the next generation of companies that can help us use large scale models in new ways. The other thing I should say, just for completeness, is this is not a new technology. The idea of transformers, which is what powers foundation models or large language models, has been around for about 6 years now, since a paper by Google Brain.
Yeah, no, I love that because everyone's enamored by ChatGPT, and I'm like, what about Detect GPT, right? What about the small language models that have actually become just as effective as the large language models? And we're not always connected to, especially in the Army, the enterprise cloud, and we don't have ubiquitous comms. And so being able to hit something like that, we all hit it now. Look at the latency. We can't look at that. So we got to look at hybrid environments or hybrid solutions. And then the other portion, I bring up the whole Detect GPT, right? There's so much great tech out there that we are inventing. We, smart people, are inventing to use on the commercial side. There's dual use, like you said. There's applicability on the government side as well. But then the unintended consequences and the unintended uses of the tech, think about it, our peer threats are already using that. So we need industry's help to help us think about the unintended consequences and unintended uses of the technology so we could defend against that better. And again, I implore commercial companies who are thinking about new tech and new mission sets. Okay, well, think about the same analogy of ChatGPT to TechGPT and help us fix those type of issues and shore up our risk against our peer threats.
Neil, thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I really think it gets down to two kind of parts of the equation. One is that ability to combine kind of technical understanding with mission understanding, which is really what Young is doing a great job talking about here. And two is picking the right technologies and picking the right stack of technologies to help you accomplish your goal or the end outcome that you're searching for. And to be able to figure out how do you actually leverage the most cutting edge technology that's a fit for the mission outcome that you're looking for. I often describe it kind of moving away from dual use phraseology to just pure play tech kind of phraseology, as you're looking for that product market fit. And there's a difference between cool tech and a product that actually helps people improve their lives.
Yeah, thoughts there?
Yeah, I love that notion of product mentality, right? I mean, whether it's agile and DevSecOps, whether it's data and just what you said, the whole product mentality has to be a shift. I know you and I get that, but we have to help educate other people to understand what that paradigm shift is, because it is huge and significant. And again, on the government and the military side, we're not quite there yet with industry. And so again, the more you can help us with that, the better.
Yeah, 100%. You know, my pithy one-liner is always consumerization of enterprise, consumerization of defense. In the same way, any of the consumer apps you use are intuitive, they're easy to use, they're easy to learn. So too, do we need to shift the paradigm?
That's right. I mean, so whether you like Steve Jobs or Apple or not, the intuitive nature of things has to be the future, because think about it, what the Ukrainians are doing with tech, because it's intuitive, it's obvious. They're able to kind of break away from the technical debt that we are stuck with, that we're trying to evolve. But the intuitive nature, the product focus, the consumer focus, the mission focus, that's got to be our way kind of going forward.
Yeah, and I do think, to give the Army credit, we've moved away from kind of the rainfall approach where it has been much more iterative, and we learned our lesson sometimes in a not so great way in decades past. So, but it does come down to the war for talent. And, you know, I know you spent some time talking about the Ukraine, and Ukraine is obviously on top of everyone's mind, but also our peer competitor in China. They're 3 times the size of us in population and geographic. They obviously have overseas military operations bases now in Cambodia, in Africa, and Djibouti specifically. And they're gearing up for a fight. They've doubled their defense budget the last 10 years. This past year, it's been a 7.1% increase. Taiwan is obviously unfortunately, probably, you know, we worry about that, and we should worry about that. And that's why we're doing things like the CHIPS Act and this CHIPS and Science Act to get some of the semiconductor manufacturing back in the United States. But I would say, you look at Taiwan, they've mobilized their young people. Every young citizen there has to actually stand up and join the military for 1 year. I'm never for forced draft, force people to serve their country. But I have partnered in years past when I was at the Pentagon with, you know, the Chief of Staff, Jim McConville, and Chairman Milley now, you know, saying, hey, not everybody has to go to basic training for 8 weeks and then go to AIT. And then we need folks that are people like Neil here, that are wicked smart, that love this country, and say, hey, I have a different skill set that I could help bring to the fight. Let me put me in, coach.
Yeah.
And we have to make that easy to make it, frankly, intuitive for them to join our team.
Yeah, no, you're 1,000% right on that. And part of the reason why, besides Doug asking me, right, is when I saw that on the technology side, we were behind China. Let's face it, right? We're behind China in certain areas, and tech area is one of them. And when you think about that, even me as an ex-Army, West Point, Fort Bragg type of guy, to come back into the Army was a long process. So we have to do better about enabling industry to help the government, to let them help them from a product perspective, from a services perspective, from a solution, but also to attract the talent. So we reduce the barriers to come back into the Army or join the government, and then let them go back and then come back and forth. There's obstacles. We don't help ourselves when we find talent. And, you know, part of it's like I had to twist some friends to come back and join the Army, right, with me as well, because we want to do it for the right reasons. But it literally took 3 months from a verbal offer to a written offer to get someone in. And you lose talent like that if you can't hire them on the spot in the tech world. And if we can't do something like that or reduce the barriers of entry or re-entry back and forth in the government, we're not helping ourselves. So I think Army, for example, we are piloting a lot of different things. We have a lot of authorities and direct hiring authorities to allow us to do that. Cyber acceptive services is another way of getting at that. So we are looking at that. DOD is looking at that, and thankfully Congress has given us some authorities to do that. But the more of that we can promote, the better we can be. And again, we're going to need some help from industry as well as Congress to help with the authorities and enable us to reduce those barriers to entry.
Yeah, and I think that, the Congress and others don't understand, right now we're the federal government's 60,000 people short just in cyber professionals. And what's holding a lot of folks up are they don't have a national security clearance, where every year over 200,000 young Americans leave active service, become veterans, they have a security clearance, they could go into cyber. So that's why I'm the chairman of what's called Task Force Cyber. We launched it at the White House with President Biden and Secretary Buttigieg, getting folks in trucking and cyber because we were hurting with the supply chain and cyber. But I love the fact that you talked about the values. And what Young didn't mention was the fact that you had an exit with Atlas Research, so you're blessed in that way. In the private sector, so you take a pay cut to go in the government because you believe in our American values, that you've committed your life and you're living the creed of West Point. The mission statement of West Point is not just go give 5 years active duty as lieutenant and a captain. It is that we develop leaders of character for a lifetime of service. That is and you are living that, Young, and I appreciate it. But if you can, those values that are different than other countries, and the access to be able to serve and give your talents to this nation at a defining moment in world history, how do you see it? What more could we do as a country?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think it kind of gets back to the nature of two things. One is that kind of value of service. That's kind of the overriding driver. But underneath that hood, I almost think of it as like, any other type of engineering problem. You have a, pipeline of some sort. And at the end state, you want to take folks that want to help their country, that want to serve their country, and you want to get them helping you, whether it's directly or it's working for a company of some sort that's supporting the mission. And the question becomes, what can you do all along that way to help? From making it easier for folks to get security clearances, to perhaps better defining what needs to be classified versus what doesn't need to be classified, to moving faster, or even having SLAs in terms of how long it takes for someone to go from first interview to actually being selected. I think there are many things that you can do, and it's all about those incremental adjustments and the authorities that allow you to do that across the hood.
We got to wrap it up soon. First, gentlemen, I appreciate you being here with the American Future Series. This panel that we have today is being seen by over 100,000 folks. It's one of the largest panels at South by Southwest, so I appreciate it. So let's go to final thoughts, final ask. What's the call to action? Young, I'll go to you first. What do you want our viewers to know about your role here at South by Southwest, your role at the Pentagon, and what could they do to be part of the solution?
For me, I look at it as like I'm a scrum master at the enterprise. What are the enterprise barriers and obstacles that I can impact at the headquarters level? You know this well, right? Do you want me to code and go back to coding? Maybe, but really, I think my utility is really to evangelize the message, change some of the culture, break down those institutional obstacles. And for me, part of why I'm here at South by is one, AFC. We have a great relationship with Futures Command, and we do so much with DevCom and Software Factory, all of these organizations. So I'm going to support them as much as I can, whenever I can. The other thing is to also reach out to industry, right? We need help. We have incredibly hard problems. We have incredibly hard scenarios that we need to apply technology on. And so for me, I just want to get the word out. We need help. Industry, please help us with our wicked hard problems. You'll make money on the way. Don't sell me the widget. Apply that widget to help us with the mission, just like you had said, Neil. So that's my role. That's my mission. So I appreciate your time.
Yeah, and I think General Rainey, following the footsteps of General Murray, doing a phenomenal job at Army Futures Command. I'm proud that it's here in Austin. But as you said earlier, let's keep Austin weird.
Yeah.
All right, Neil, final thought, call to action.
Yeah, I think it gets down to this really, really kind of simple message. What can you do to help? And how can you build solutions to solve really, really hard problems?
Yeah, and I do think it's all about public-private partnerships, right? It's and again, I understand in our country there's a separation of church and state. I'm not talking about First Amendment religion. I'm talking about, you know, private sector and government. But there is ways to partner where we don't take it over, but there's ways to partner, and the companies that share American values uh, are important to partner with us on. I think that was one of the things in my time in the Pentagon. Was very proud that they really launched some public-private partnerships, some in tech, some just in manpower stuff with the Chamber of Commerce and Hiring a Hero, career summits, et cetera. Because I had to pay the UCX bill where we were paying $1 billion a year just to pay unemployment benefits. And, that was not the right use of taxpayer dollars, although those veterans earned it. We just want to make sure they had a job and move forward. Hey, real quick, because I forgot to ask this one thing, I love the quote from Ronald Reagan where he talked about trust and verify. What's explain that's what part of the product that you do in your company. If you can describe it to the listeners out there as one of your final thoughts of what you do every day.
Yeah, 100%. So we build software that allows you to go from the underlying data that you're using to train your machine learning model to models deployed in production being monitored for security risks. And it's great that we have that kind of additional layer sitting on top, helping you make sure that your model is secure. But even on top of us, you want to make sure that our software is working correctly and that you can trust it. And so we include a bunch of standard statistical measures on top that anyone with a 2-week course in statistics should be able to verify themselves and use that as a way of extrapolating to some of the more sophisticated statistics or metrics that we use. And I think the larger idea that you should be able to verify the performance of a system that you're using, that you're working with, and that you need to rely on should be key in any product or any technology that you're using.
And who in the federal government here in our country are you working with currently?
So we do a lot of work with the Air Force. We do less work with the Army, but we really want to do more work with the Army and kind of help support the men and women currently serving inside of the Army.
I saw you are doing like a SIBR with the Homeland Security, and I was thinking.
Well, so we also are doing a lot of work with DHS, helping protect airports and helping protect really, really key infrastructure from a machine learning perspective, and a number of other really, really interesting kind of projects.
When I left my house today at 4:30 in the morning, I had been prepping for the interview today, and I was thinking, if I get jammed up because of your company, Neil, I'm going to bust your chops publicly. I got through fine. Well, that's going to wrap it up for us today here at American Future Series for this great panel. To Young and Neil, gentlemen, thank you so much for all that you do to keep our country safe, but also to make sure that our warriors out there don't have a fair fight, that they have the technical and tactical advantage over enemies. God bless both of you, and God bless America. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.